Hey everyone, it's in the Future here, and there's been a little bit quiet on the channel, so I figured I'd release a new video on the topic of melodies this time, because we already talked a lot about drums, but we haven't talked that much about melodies yet, so that seemed like a proper thing to talk about for a little while. Now I think you can follow along with mostly the micro sequencer bundle, but I can't 100% guarantee it. But if I use anything that isn't in the microsequencer bundle, odds are you can probably find an alternative in Voltage already, although it might take up a little bit more space. This video will strictly focus on the sequencing part, so even though we do need some sort of tone, obviously, there are three elements to a sequence, to a melody sequence. You need to have a tone, a rhythm, and some sort of pitch. We are going to leave the tone mostly as an afterthought, which is never a very good idea when you're actually doing like musical stuff, but yeah, for the sake of demonstration and to save a little bit of time, we're just going to use a very simple tone generator, which is this little thing. It's just a oscillator running through a filter, running through the amplifier, and it gives us this little plinky sound. Very simple. We give it a little bit of release to give it a little bit of time, because otherwise it would sound very unfluid, if that's even a word. So this is the tone we're going to work with, and from here we will build things out. And just because we don't actually want to look at this, I'm just going to blank it. There we go, and off to the side. So let's talk about the other two elements, because those are the interesting things. And I think the first thing we should talk about is rhythm, because we don't want to be actually using like a keyboard to play things, or we don't want to be pushing a button to create rhythm. We want to control this in some manner. Now, the most straight way to do this is just to use a simple clock. Now, the neat thing of the vulnerable little clock is you can just set it to a speed. There we go. If you want to make it a little bit faster, or slower, you can perfectly control it with a clock, although a clock is a little bit boring. So actually micro does help you out a little bit here, because all the clocks have one output that is combined. So if you want a little bit more of a funky thing, you can actually use a clock as a generator. But we are going to do some other things. Let's start off with a simple step sequencer, because that's kind of the obvious thing to do. So let's grab a sequencer. And we still need a clock, of course. Now let's put our clock at 1/4. This will trigger our sequencer. There she blows. And now we have a rhythm. And this is one very nice controlled way to generate a rhythm. If you want to actually randomize it from this point on, you can use it as a probability step sequencer simply by turning on the random. And it will randomly grab either an active or an inactive step. This is great if you want to really plan things out and have a very controlled setting. Nothing wrong with it, but it's also a little bit boring and it's not very generative, which is kind of more the vibe we want to go towards. So let's look at another option. The other option is the Euclidean sequencer. Once again, this needs a clock. And we're going to give it a trigger button. Now the Euclidean sequencer works fairly simple. You have a amount of steps and a amount of hits. And depending on how many hits and steps you have, you get a fixed pattern. So with 8/8, you have 8 steps and 8 hits. Obviously, every step is going to be a hit. But once you start to lower the amount of hits, you get a fixed rhythm again. And the nice thing here is because the micro Euclidean has 2 stages, you can once again use the combined output. To get a bit more of a erratic pattern. Which is quite fun. So that's another way you can sequence things. I would actually say with the Euclidean, I would probably put the clock a little bit faster. And maybe we should contextualize this. As you can hear, it's a pretty complicated pattern. Once again, you can kind of make that more controlled by just resetting it every beat. So if you do that with the reset trigger. You can generate patterns quite easily, and that's what we're after. We're here to start with a rhythmic element, and once we find a rhythmic element that works for us, we can move on to the next phase, which is adding pitch information to this sequence. Now, if this kind of sequencing is still a little bit too predictable for you, we also have the probabilistic trigger sequencer, and this one basically generates triggers at random. So I actually want to keep the bass drum going. Oh, let's put it there. It's a bit much otherwise. Now what the probabilistic trigger sequencer does is every step has a chance to happen, and whether or not it will happen well, is basically random. So let's just quickly reset all the clocks and output this to the trigger gate. Now in the basic setting, every step has a 50% chance of occurring. Let's make the first step a little bit more likely, make these a little bit less likely, and just and unlike the trigger sequencer where you can set it to random and it will randomly select a on or off step, here you can actually control the rhythm a little bit by saying I always want step 1 to happen, I always want a tone on step 1 and for instance step 3, and the other ones will be random. So it gives you a bit more control while still staying within a generative frame. So this is a pretty solid start, I would say. So let's keep this, and let's say this is our rhythm generator. You blank. So this is our sound generator, and it is our rhythm generator. Probably not how you spell it, but it is what it is. Cool. So now we have a sound and a rhythm. We still need some form of pitch information. I'm just going to spell check this because it's going to drive me crazy otherwise. Exactly. And it was indeed incorrectly spelled. So it's fixed now. Everybody's happy. Cool. So we have a rhythm and we have a sound. So now we need to think about pitch. Now there are many ways to generate pitch information, but I want to keep it pretty basic. So let's take a look at CV Sequencer first. Now CV Sequencer is a pretty simple tool. Every step you can set the CV, and that's the CV it will output at that step. But the nice thing is here you can actually quantize this CV. So you have a quantizer for 1 volt range, quantizer for a 5 volt range, and a 2 octave quantization. We're going to stick to the 2 octave quantization. We are going to trigger this with the same trigger that's triggering the probability. So let's do that. Let's make sure they are actually in sync. Yep, seems to be good. Let's output this to the oscillator pitch. After all, that's what we're interested in. So let's hear what's going on now. That's pretty cool. But there's something weird happening. We got a sort of weird glidey thing. So we're going to change that a little bit. Instead of triggering the sequence every time, we're only going to trigger it when the envelope trigger happens. So let's take this. Now this sequence right now is just random notes, and if you mouse over you can actually see the notes they are. And because I didn't spend any time looking at this, it's just literally random notes. And we can make this a little bit more usable by quantizing it. So let's grab a little quantizer here. So now we can actually stick it to a scale, which is probably going to sound a little bit better. So let's go for G. G is fun. G Dorian. Let's see what happens. Nice little side effect here is because we only trigger the sequencer whenever the probability happens, is that the sequence is not as steadfast as you would expect. It's still the same notes playing in the same order, but when they play will be different depending on when the triggers happen. You can keep the sequence steady, in which case you would use a sample and hold. Just sample the sequencer with the trigger, and then you will get a trigger sequencer and a note sequencer which continuously run, but you only get note information whenever it triggers the oscillator. But that's not something we're going to look into today. So this is a CV sequencer, very easy way to generate a little melody here. But we can also change this up a little bit. So let's take a look at another tool which is fairly new, but is actually more suited for this little experiment. So this is scale degree sequencer, and scale degree sequencer has a neat little trick. It's already quantized, so that's a nice start. You can trigger it like any sequencer from a clock, so we're just going to do that. Actually, we're going to trigger it once again from the probability trigger to make sure we don't get any weirries. And with the scale degree sequencer, we can set the odds of a degree happening from any scale. So first off, we need to set the scale. Let's put it at G again. Let's put it at Dorian again. And if we set it up like this, every time it gets triggered, it will just generate the first note, the tonic note. So it should just generate one tone. It's a little bit boring, but now you can actually add chances to other degrees happening. So let's add a third. Let's do fifth. Actually, a fair bit of fifth and a very tiny chance for the eighth to happen. A little spicy note there. Let's see. The cool thing is we now have a pitch generation which is literally a single module big, which is very compact. Let's plunk it in there, And now we have a random little melody generator, which is very easy to set up and very easy to influence, but it still is a generative system. So the pitch it generates is random, the rhythm it generates is random, and it's also still within scale. So you can very easily set a scale, change the scale, and you will get a new fitting little melody. And that's basically how easy it is to set up a generative melody system with micro modules. And I think that's a very nice thing to be able to do. There's not a whole lot of things you need to understand or a whole lot of things you need to patch up. Just the rhythm generator session. I mean, this is technically a clock reset, so it doesn't have to be there. And you're going to have a clock in the patch anyways, so we can actually just move that out as well. So what you're really looking at is just two modules to generate random pitch and rhythm information. I think that's super powerful and super fun to play around with. And if you have any questions about this or any feedback on micro modules, leave it down below and I will see you in the next video.